The Primarchs of Warhammer 40k are larger than life, demigod generals who shaped the fate of the galaxy. Some are universally beloved, like Sanguinius, the Golden Boy, Horus, the ultimate villain, or Guilliman, the guy who won't stop winning even 10,000 years later. But for every Primarch that gets showered with praise, there are others who barely get the credit they deserve. Some were brilliant tacticians, masterful artisans, or devastating warriors, but for one reason or another, their contributions have been largely overlooked, both in-universe and out. So what makes a Primarch underrated? This isn't about ranking them from worst to best. It's about recognizing the ones who, despite their abilities, never quite got their due. Maybe they were overshadowed by their more dramatic brothers. Maybe they were mishandled in the lore. Or maybe the Imperium itself failed to appreciate them until it was too late. Whatever the case, each of these Primarchs had the potential to be far greater than what they were remembered for. And at the very end, we'll reveal the most underrated Primarch of them all. Someone who was so disrespected that even his own allies never recognized his worth. But before we get there, let's take a look at the Primarchs who deserved better. Fulgrim is the kind of guy who walks into a room and immediately makes everyone feel ugly. He's the definition of almost effortless perfection. At least, that's how he wanted to be remembered before he went full crazy, sexy snake. But beneath all the preening and self-adoration, Fulgrim was one of the most naturally gifted Primarchs in several key areas, and it's a tragedy that people only remember him for the excess and not the excellence. Let's start with his martial prowess. Fulgrim was, without question, one of the finest duelists among the Primarchs. Sure, there were a few outliers who could outmatch him. Sanguinius, with his super speed and Khorne tier strength, and Lion L. Johnson, who operates on pure instinct and somehow thinks faster than someone who can see the future. But when it came to the art of the sword, the sheer elegance and deadliness of combat distilled into its purest form, Fulgrim was unparalleled. His fight with Ferrus Manus is particularly telling. He didn't just defeat Ferrus, he dismantled him with the kind of ease that suggests he wasn't even breaking a sweat. Ferrus, for all his raw power, was completely outclassed by a Primarch who fought like war was a ballet, and he was the lead dancer. Then there's his craftsmanship. People tend to overlook the fact that Fulgrim wasn't just a great swordsman, he was also a master artisan. This man forged an artifact-level weapon in a contest against Ferrus Manus, and Ferrus is no slouch when it comes to forging. In fact, Ferrus should have had the upper hand. His entire shtick is being a master of both technology and forging, and yet Fulgrim still created something that matched him blow for blow. If he hadn't decided that screaming at mirrors for eternity was a more fulfilling career path, Fulgrim could have easily been one of the greatest artisans of his age. Intellectually, he was quite the genius. He took command of a shattered legion, one that was struggling to maintain its numbers, and through sheer tactical brilliance, he turned them into an effective force that punched far above their weight. He didn't just throw his sons into the meat grinder like some of his more dim-witted brothers. He played the long game, minimizing losses and maximizing results. This wasn't just arrogance, it was competence, something that tends to get overshadowed by the whole turned into a snake demon thing. But what really makes Fulgrim underrated is his initial vision. He wasn't just another warlord looking to conquer the stars. He wanted humanity to ascend, to become something greater. His philosophy was built on the idea of guiding mankind toward perfection, leading by example rather than by brute force. It was an ideology that, in another universe, might have actually worked. But instead of enlightenment, He took a detour straight into hedonistic insanity, which is a bit like starting a self-improvement journey and ending up selling pics of your butt on OnlyFans. Fulgrim deserved better. Or maybe, considering how things ended, humanity deserved better than Fulgrim. Either way, he's one of the most underrated Primarchs, not just because of his skill, but because of what he could have been if he hadn't decided that slithering into damnation was more fun. Jagatai Khan is what happens when a Primarch is designed entirely around one word: speed. He's fast, his strategies are fast, his ships are fast, his whole existence is dedicated to making things move faster. And the fact that the Mechanicum never kidnapped him and hooked him up to a supercomputer for warp travel optimization is honestly a miracle. But despite being the Imperium's designated speed freak, people tend to overlook just how skilled and insightful he actually was. This guy wasn't just some high-speed maniac on a space bike. He was a duelist, a strategist, a philosopher, and most importantly, one of the few Primarchs who didn't have his head permanently lodged inside his own ass. His martial ability is criminally underrated. He wasn't just some run-in-and-swing-wildly type of fighter. He had precision. Even Sanguinius once asked him who was the better duelist between him and Fulgrim, and the Khan didn't hesitate to say he'd win. His reasoning? Fulgrim gets too caught up in his own flair. Fulgrim turns every duel into a performance, a perfect display of form and artistry, which makes him incredibly predictable to someone who actually pays attention. The Khan studied Fulgrim's technique, but Fulgrim never bothered studying the Khan, because why would he? He's Fulgrim, and you're supposed to be watching him, not the other way around. It's a perfect example of why Khan was deceptively deadly. He wasn't just fast, he was smart about it. His obsession with speed wasn't just limited to himself. The Khan was essentially a one-man R&D department, constantly figuring out ways to make Imperial technology move faster. He refined ships, streamlined engines, and probably would have invented the 40k equivalent of nitrous oxide if given enough time. The White Scar's entire war doctrine was built around getting from A to B before the enemy even realized there was an A or a B to begin with. In a way, he was like the orcs with their red ones go faster mentality, except instead of relying on sheer stupidity warping reality, he actually used engineering and science, which, in the Imperium, is arguably more heretical. And then there's his sword dance state, which is where things get ridiculous. The Khan could enter a meditative trance, becoming one with his blade, and in this state, his speed went from Primarch tier to something that shouldn't be physically possible. He could move faster than any of his brothers, with the possible exception of Sanguinius, and when he let loose, it was absolute carnage. One time, he single-handedly cleared out an entire orc stronghold, moving so fast that the orcs, creatures literally built for violence, were reduced to screaming, crying, pissing, and shitting in terror as they tried to run from a whirlwind of death. Imagine being an orc. You live for war. You love fighting. And then one afternoon, a man on a bike swings by so fast that your entire species collectively reconsiders its life choices. That's Jagatai Khan. But what really sets him apart is his ideology. Khan wasn't blind to the Imperium's flaws. He understood that for all its grand proclamations of unity, the Imperium was still a prison, just a very large one where the bars were made of bureaucracy and the guards had chainsaws for arms. He fought for the Emperor, but he saw the hypocrisy in the dream. He knew that while the Imperium was the lesser evil, it was still an evil. And yet when the time came to choose between the Imperium and his favorite brother, Magnus, he chose the Imperium. Not out of blind loyalty, but because he knew it was the right thing to do. That's the beauty of the Khan. He's a warrior who longs for freedom, a spirit that wants to race through the stars forever, but at the same time, he understands that some things must be finished. He doesn't just fight because he has to, he fights because he chooses to. Jagatai Khan isn't just an underrated Primarch, he's one of the most unique, a philosopher warrior who embraced both speed and wisdom, a killer who understood restraint, and a man who could make the orcs feel fear. And if that doesn't make him worth remembering, then nothing does. Ferrus Manus is the classic case of wasted potential. He had all the makings of a fascinating Primarch, one whose mastery of technology could have pushed the Imperium into an era of unparalleled advancement. Instead, Games Workshop gave him a tragic but underdeveloped arc before promptly lopping off his head and tossing him into the narrative garbage bin. Ferrus wasn't just another craftsman in the Primarch lineup, he was the one most attuned to technology itself. Vulcan may have been the best blacksmith, and Dawn, Perturabo, and even Fulgrim had their own talents in crafting. But Ferrus stood apart as a true master of technological understanding. The Emperor clearly intended him to be the custodian of the Imperium's most powerful and dangerous artifacts, trusting him with Dark Age relics and forbidden knowledge. This wasn't just a sign of Ferrus's skill, it was proof of his discipline and unwavering commitment to keeping technology in check. In an alternate reality, where the writers actually cared about him, we might have seen him reverse engineer Xenos tech or refine existing Imperium technology to heights no other Primarch could match. Instead, we got some vague references to his skill and almost no meaningful demonstrations of it. Beyond his technological prowess, Ferrus was also an exceptional strategist. His name was in serious contention for War Master alongside the Lion and Horus, which speaks volumes about his tactical brilliance. Even Horus, the master manipulator, desperately wanted Ferrus on his side during the heresy because he knew that Ferrus was one of the few who could match his strategic acumen. And when Ferrus refused, Horus viewed his death as a complete waste. That's the thing. Had Ferrus survived Istvan, the entire war could have unfolded very differently. He was one of the few Primarchs capable of countering Horus directly, both in tactics and in sheer battlefield presence. But instead of cool, calculated leadership, Ferrus went on a roaring rampage of revenge when Fulgrim betrayed him. He let his emotions override his tactical mind, and it cost him everything. Had he not been blinded by rage, he could have rallied the Loyalist forces and turned Istvan into an absolute bloodbath for the traitors. His death wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a colossal setback for the Imperium. Ultimately, Ferrus Manus is underrated not because people fail to recognize his strengths, but because the law itself failed him. He had the potential to be one of the most significant figures in the Imperium's history, an innovator, a warrior, and a general who could have changed the course of the heresy. Instead, he was reduced to a cautionary tale about what happens when rage clouds judgment. His story could have been so much more, and that's what makes his mishandling so frustrating. He isn't just underrated, he was outright wasted. Lastly, we have the most bullied Primarch of them all. Perturabo isn't just underrated, he is meta underrated. He is so disrespected that his entire villain arc is basically fueled by people constantly underestimating him. His brothers, the Emperor, the Mechanicus, everyone treated him like a glorified siege engine, a blunt instrument to be pointed at a problem until the problem stopped existing. But the reality is that Perturabo is the smartest Primarch, hands down. He was Leonardo da Vinci, and Alexander the Great rolled into one, a masterful innovator, craftsman, and strategist who could have single-handedly revolutionized the Imperium if anyone had bothered to appreciate him. Instead, they just kept throwing him into the worst hellholes imaginable and expected him to take it with a smile. Spoiler, he did not. One of the best examples of his genius came after Fulgrim gave him the suck. Yes, we're saying it because Warhammer lore is ridiculous and it deserves to be treated as such. After having his soul forcibly drained by his weirdly seductive snake brother, Perturabo didn't just sit around and mope. He built the Logos, a suit of armor so advanced it was basically a one-man golden throne. This wasn't just some regular Terminator armor. This was a full-on mobile life support system that enhanced his combat abilities while keeping him alive, turning him into an unkillable walking fortress. And yet, despite pulling off that absurd feat of engineering, people still dismissed him as nothing more than a siege master. Then there's the time he fought the Hrud, which was another brutal war zone that the Imperium conveniently dumped on him. The Hrud's mysterious time-warping abilities were reducing Space Marines to dust, aging them into nothingness within seconds. A logistical and tactical nightmare. So naturally, Perturabo was sent to fix it. And fix it he did. He designed and deployed a time bomb, something akin to a massive stasis field that neutralized the Hrud's temporal distortion and turned the tide of battle. This was a technological breakthrough of staggering proportions, the kind of thing that should have made him a legend. But did the Mechanicus celebrate his genius? Number. They doubted him every step of the way, treating him like some clueless upstart while he casually reinvented battlefield physics. And after he pulled off the impossible, nothing. No recognition, no accolades, just another thankless task waiting for him. That's why Perturabo is the most underrated Primarch. He wasn't just overlooked by fans, he was dismissed in-universe. He was treated like a second-class Primarch, despite being arguably the most intelligent one of the bunch. The irony is almost poetic. Even now, in Warhammer's fanbase, Perturabo rarely gets the respect he deserves, overshadowed by the more dramatic figures like Horus, the Lion, or Guilliman. But make no mistake, if the Imperium had actually recognized his brilliance, the heresy could have gone very differently. He didn't turn traitor because he was weak or corrupt. He turned because he was done with being everyone's punching bag. And honestly, can you blame him? So, there you have it, some of the most underrated Primarchs in Warhammer 40,000. Whether it was Fulgrim's forgotten genius, Ferrus Manus's wasted potential, or Perturabo being so underrated that even his own side treated him like an afterthought, these Primarchs deserved far more credit than they ever got. Some were victims of the narrative, some were victims of their own brothers, and some were just straight up ignored. But in the end, their legacies, no matter how overlooked, still left a mark on the Imperium, the heresy, and beyond. But what do you think? Did we miss any Primarchs that deserve more recognition? Which ones do you think got the short end of the gene-forged stick? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next video. That's all for today, folks. I'll see you in the next one.